So this is the KhoodeelaarTVChannel television channel, timed at 0140 GMT, or starting a few minutes earlier, on Tuesday the 13th of February 2024. This is being broadcast from London in the United Kingdom in the morning of Tuesday the 13th of February 2024. One of the things that has been exercising me in the last, let's say, 3 days, of course, is the promotion, the triangular promotion of the congenital liar Boris Johnson as a possible savior, political savior at the next UK election of the Conservatives. Joined in the triangular by a woman, African origin woman from Nigeria, with a strange name, but that fits her. Her name, as I split it, is bad enough. Kemi bad enough. Followed in the magazine Sunday Times by Nigel Nasty, criminal liar Farage. Now, how can three individuals be said to be potentially the most effective and the most charismatic and the most compelling saviors of a party that has seen? The Conservative Party has, as a political party, sunk. And it is evident in the fact that somebody as discredited, as disgraced, as comprehensively disgraced as a liar above anything else, such as Boris Johnson, is being touted as a savior at the election, which by all evident exhibition of evidence is likely to be ending with the obliteration of the Conservative Party at the polls. How can that happen? I have been physically present for 6 calendar decades in the United Kingdom, in England, in London. And I have not come across anything as dire, as stupid as the line being promoted by the crooks and morons that apparently write and commission and edit the so-called Fleet Street newspapers. The legacy of the Canadian racist scum, Beaverbrook, which is the Daily Express. It is absolutely irrationally promoting, and it is an irrational platform, promoting the alleged return of Boris Johnson as a savior. Now, Johnson was forced to leave the United Kingdom Parliament. He was forced to leave, he was forced to resign under the weight of evidence that became overwhelming. The evidence of his criminality, corruption, dishonesty, stupidity, selfishness. How can this be happening? On the other side of the so-called benches, the political murderer of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, the political murderer of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, has been overtaken in everything but name by the evilness, the war criminal, the mass murderer, the genocidist of the Arabs and the Palestinians, Tony Blair. This is not a scenario that actually justifies any optimism for ordinary people. There is no evidence. There is no evidence that there is, in the foreseeable future, going to be a state in the state of the United Kingdom where accountability and real representation take place on behalf of the people, the electors, the voters, the constituents, so-called. Constituents is one of the most abused words in the English vocabulary. Every time a criminal, a crook and a liar and a thief installed as an MP is left with nothing to say about his or her discreditable behavior, he or she rushes to the various levels, foremost among which is the word constituents. It never is possible to physically see what these constituents look like, except to assume that they are a collection of individuals who cast their votes at election time every so many years. Otherwise, constituents don't exist collectively. And personally, constituents don't exist at all. As evident in the crassness and the dishonesty of constituency members of parliament, taking, for example, the case of Stephen Stupid Teams. Stephen Stupid Teams has been a member of parliament since 2002. That is 22 years since this criminal, moron, liar has been in the post of member of parliament for East Ham in East London. In terms of functionality, in terms of administrative ability, as a representative, Stephen Teams could not be more stupid, more unfit for purpose. And the strange British Constitution, inherently anti-democratic, is devoid of any framework for holding an incumbent member of parliament to account. So in effect, every parliamentary constituency that has a member of parliament at the time being, for the time being, is allowed impunity from accountability. Now imagine the judgment in the last few days passed by a US court ruling that Donald Trump's bid to secure a status of immunity from accountability while he was president is not acceptable. Now, if you contrast that with the United Kingdom, you have to accept on the evidence, on the facts, that despite all the criticisms, the American judicial system is manifestly active as a judicial process. All these dozens of prosecutions against Donald Trump, or all these prosecutions of Donald Trump on the dozens of counts of crimes and criminality, unconstitutionality, could not be imagined to be happening to an incumbent or former incumbent such as Boris the congenital liar Johnson. There has been no prosecution of a British member of parliament who has become member of parliament and a leader of the party and prime minister. There has been no prosecution at all. And there have been so many crimes and criminality perpetrated by the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. To take the example of the genocidist Tony Blair. Tony Blair took part in the genocidist assault against the Afghan people, against the Iraqi people, at the behest of George W. Bush. And despite the fact that there have been so many published accounts of Tony Blair being a war criminal, mass murderer, there has been no prosecution of him in the United Kingdom, or indeed at the forum, international forum, where even the Zionist state of Israel has been prosecuted and found guilty of genocide. An unprecedented event that the Zionist state of Israel has not only been prosecuted but has been found guilty. Yet Tony Blair has escaped prosecution. Not only has he escaped prosecution, he is now ruling the agenda of the Labour Party, being fronted publicly by the political murderer of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer. So compared to the United States, the US judicial system actually exists, whereas the United Kingdom judicial system doesn't exist. And here I refer to George Gate Galloway, Git as spelled G-I-T, Git, as stupid, as dishonest. George Git Dishonest Galloway is a parasite, is a political parasite who parasited himself at the expense of the Muslim demography, or the Muslims in a particular demography in the English population. And the foremost Muslim population, Muslim demography that George Git Galloway found 22 years ago has been the one called Bethnal Green and Bow constituency. That was the time, 22 years ago, when George Git Galloway was desperate for political survival, a political float on which to actually shore himself up, as he was being sunk, mainly because of the fact that as leader of the Labour Party, the mass murderer Tony Blair expelled George Git Galloway. And contrary to the mythology that he has been spinning, George Git Galloway never, ever had a chance of becoming a member of parliament for an English constituency outside of Scotland. The only time that he became a member of parliament for an English constituency was in 2005 from Bethnal Green and Bow. And that's nothing to do with Bethnal Green and Bow constituency demography having a mixed population. It was essentially the super focusing on the Muslim part of the population in Bethnal Green and Bow. And George Galloway left no stone unturned as he paraded himself dishonestly, determinedly, as the champion of the Muslims. Nothing could be further from the truth. But he did exhibit himself as the champion of the Muslims. And the Muslims were mobilized by various perpetrators of various slogans to consider George Git Galloway as a champion of the Muslims, as the champion of the Muslims. So Git Galloway got in. After he got in, his status vis-a-vis Tony Blair changed radically. Because again, he became an MP, and not only an MP, but an MP in his own claims, outside of the Labour Party's list. And in the 10 years or so since he became an MP in 2015, 2005, George Git Galloway became the most noisiest utterer of claims against Tony Blair. But that was all a sham, because Git Galloway never raised the possibility of prosecuting Tony Blair, either in the English court system or at the Hague, the International Forum. And that's where I think the South African initiative against the Zionist state of Israel stands out as a remarkable one. The second thing that George Galloway did, apart from failure to prosecute Tony Blair, was his willingness to become a slave to the Brexiteers. And he became a slave personally to nasty Nigel Farage. So much so that he publicly begged nasty Nigel Farage at one point to allow George Galloway to stand as a by-election candidate carrying the political card associated with nasty Nigel Farage, who said to George Galloway, "Fuck off." George Galloway has no shame. And he has been behaving since being told to fuck off by Nigel Nasty Farage as if this didn't happen. Well, it did happen. Not only did it happen, but it happened in the public in plain sight. When he was incumbent as Member of Parliament, at the expense of Bethnal Green and Bow, in the name of Bethnal Green and Bow, George Galloway had a close circle of racists as his staff. Those racists are as ungrateful, have been as ungrateful as George Galloway himself. But they have no shame, they have no hesitation. They have no hesitation in rushing to the next opportunity to grab hold of a constituency seat where Muslims form the central core of the particular constituency electorate, which is why they rushed to Bradford West in Yorkshire. In the course of the campaign for that seat, George Galloway and his close circle of racist liars published a number of statements saying that George Galloway was an opponent of racism. Not only that he was comparable to the most outspoken anti-racist Black Americans. But that was all a lie. When he got in at the election in 2012, George Galloway, as he had done in Bethnal Green and Bow, forgot all about these promises and set about to pursue his career. The career being that he kept on claiming that he was against Tony Blair and that he was for the people of Palestine. Absolute lies. Which is why the current genocide by the Israeli state, aided and abetted by the United Kingdom, the USA, France, and other Zionist supporters, is not getting the anything like the factual condemnation by George Galloway at all. We shall be continuing on this and adding the key lessons to the draft that we are publishing, we are posting to the Baby Angel Geronimo manifesto for all animals and humans. This is now ending broadcast at 01:57 hours on GMT on Tuesday the 13th of February 2024.